matter what's happening in the world, the seasons will come and go. That's it. It doesn't matter what else is going on. Winter will come, spring will come, summer will come.
Amanda Owen from Our Yorkshire Farm shocked everyone when she divorced her husband. And it happened almost immediately after some surprising events. Fans were left speechless. What could have pushed the Yorkshire shepherdess to end over 20 years of marriage so suddenly? Was it a scandal, a secret, or something far deeper? Here's the full story behind what really happened and why she walked away. Join us as we unveil all the details. The fame that hid the storm. At first glance, Amanda and Clive Owen looked like the perfect country couple. They worked hard, raised 9 children, and ran a massive hill farm deep in the Yorkshire Dales. To fans watching on television, they were more than just farmers. They were an inspiration, a rare kind of family living a peaceful life far from the noise of the outside world. Our Yorkshire Farm showed them feeding sheep, braving snowstorms, laughing with their kids, and working the land together. Viewers felt like they knew them, but the truth behind the screen wasn't quite as simple. It all began quietly. One small TV appearance turned into another, and before long, the Owens were household names. When they were first featured in a countryside documentary, their story stood out not because it was glamorous, but because it was real. Amanda, often with a toddler, moved through each task with calm strength. Clive, quiet and steady, handled the animals and guided the children with care. The kids joined in farm chores without complaint. The public couldn't get enough. Soon, Channel 5 offered them their series. And so, in 2018, Our Yorkshire Farm was born. Cameras followed the family through every season, through snow-covered nights and long summer days spent haymaking. People across Britain tuned in each week to see life on Ravenseat Farm. There were no fancy kitchens or shiny tractors, just muddy boots, cold winds, and a family making it all work. Amanda's popularity grew quickly. Her natural charm, honest words, and no-nonsense attitude made her a favorite. She shared farm updates on social media and gave people a real look at country life. Her photos were full of messy moments, stuck sheep, tired faces, and happy chaos. It was far from perfect. That's what made it lovable. Publishers noticed. Soon, Amanda was writing books, appearing on talk shows, and being invited to speak at events. The woman the public had first met in wellies and wool hats was now stepping onto stages and magazine covers. And while Amanda's world was getting bigger, Clive stayed rooted in the same routines. He continued to run the farm, support the children, and keep life steady while Amanda traveled for work. At first, this balance worked. But over time, it began to create distance. Amanda was meeting new people, visiting new places, and being celebrated for her role as the Yorkshire shepherdess. Clive, though proud, found it harder to adjust. The show made them famous, but it also placed pressure on their lives. Every small decision was now watched by thousands. When Amanda missed a family moment because of a book event, people noticed. If Clive looked unhappy on camera, it sparked rumors. The warmth that once held them together slowly began to cool. As Amanda's confidence and public profile grew, Clive became more withdrawn. It wasn't that one wanted fame and the other didn't. It was more like their paths began pulling in different directions. Amanda was thinking ahead about security, the children's futures, and new projects. Clive was thinking about keeping the farm running just as it always had. That quiet difference grew louder with each passing year. Behind the scenes, arguments became more frequent. Amanda was tired from juggling work, travel, and motherhood. Clive struggled with Amanda being away so often. He missed the old days, the simpler times before cameras and deadlines. Amanda, on the other hand, felt like she had to constantly prove she was still present, still loyal, still holding her end of the partnership. She would return from late-night events, sometimes stopping at 24-hour shops on the way back just to make sure the kitchen was stocked. She didn't want anyone to feel like she was forgetting the family. But deep down, she was worn out. And Clive, trying to hide his frustration, sometimes let it slip out in anger. He later admitted that jealousy had taken root. He felt left behind in a world where Amanda was now the star. To outsiders, everything looked fine. The kids still helped out. The sheep were still fed. The house still echoed with life. But cracks had started to show. Amanda and Clive were no longer moving in the same direction, and no matter how many smiling pictures appeared online, the tension behind them was real. A lot was happening. The silences, the quiet disagreements, the shift in closeness. Amanda was gaining the world, but something at home was slowly slipping out of reach, and soon the big cracks were showing behind the camera. Cracks behind the camera. As Amanda's world kept expanding, the cracks in her marriage were becoming harder to ignore. What once felt like a partnership slowly started to feel like two people living side by side, but no longer walking together. While the cameras kept rolling and fans kept tuning in, life behind closed doors was shifting in a way no one expected. For Clive, things had changed too quickly. He had always loved the quiet type of farm life, the same paths, the same duties, the same sense of purpose. But now, everything felt louder. There were film crews around, producers asking for interviews, and strangers showing up at the gate hoping to catch a clear picture of the family they'd seen on TV. Clive preferred the background. He didn't want fame, he just wanted to farm. But that wasn't so easy anymore. Amanda tried to hold everything together. She was still managing the children, the sheep, the housework, all while attending events and building a career outside the farm. Her schedule was packed, and the pressure to please everyone was starting to weigh her down. Some days, she'd leave home before sunrise to make it to a book signing, and drive back late just to be home in time to feed the animals or check on the kids. She didn't want anyone to say she was choosing fame over family. But the more she tried to prove that, the more stretched she became. Clive, watching it all unfold, didn't always know how to react. He admitted later that he started pulling away. His silence turned into frustration, and his frustration sometimes turned into anger. Not the kind of loud fights people imagine, just cold words, long silences, and days that passed without warmth. Amanda tried to reach out, but it felt like they were speaking two different languages. And the more she pushed herself to keep the peace, the more invisible she began to feel. To fans, Amanda was still smiling. Her photos showed muddy boots and happy sheep. Her posts were filled with gratitude and humor. But behind those captions were long nights, heavy stress, and a growing sense that the person who once knew her best now barely looked her in the eye. It wasn't just the distance of travel. It was the distance of the heart. At one point, Amanda began spending more time in a nearby rental cottage. It was close to Ravenseat, but gave her space to breathe. Neighbors noticed. The media noticed too. Rumors started to spread. Some guessed they were having problems. Others blamed Amanda's busy career. A few even whispered about other people being involved. Amanda kept quiet at first. She didn't want the world getting into something so personal, but silence only made the rumors louder. Meanwhile, the show was still going strong. Each new season drew more viewers, more praise, and more headlines. But filming had become harder. What used to feel natural now felt like acting. Amanda and Clive still worked together for the cameras, but the closeness was missing. Amanda would later say that she felt like they were pretending not just for the audience, but for themselves. They both wanted to protect the image of the farm, the family, and the life they had built, but pretending was taking a toll. Clive was feeling pushed aside. His role in the show was shrinking, while Amanda's name kept growing. She was invited to festivals, writing retreats, and media panels. People were calling her the face of farming. And while she was proud of what they'd created, she couldn't ignore how Clive was withdrawing more each day. The man who once laughed with her in the barn now barely spoke when the cameras weren't around. They tried to hold on. For the kids, for the farm, for everything they had built together. But some days, it felt like the harder they held on, the faster things slipped away. Amanda wasn't just working. She was also growing in new directions. She was having conversations, forming friendships, and seeing new sides of herself that Clive didn't understand anymore. She started to feel like she was living two lives, one in front of the public and one in private, that was quietly falling apart. There were still kind moments. They still fed sheep together, still shared dinners, and laughed with the kids from time to time. But it was different now. The silence had grown thicker. The show carried on, the followers kept growing, and the farm still needed running. But something inside the marriage had shifted. Not in one big moment, but in hundreds of tiny ones. And slowly, Amanda began to understand what that meant. When everything came to light. By the time the public began asking questions, Amanda and Clive were already living separate lives under the same roof. Still, both tried to hold the image together. But eventually, that image cracked wide open. The first signs of something bigger happening came through rumors in the media. When a few photos of Amanda in a new cottage surfaced, some reporters claimed she was no longer living full-time at the farmhouse. Others began to mention a man named Robert Davies, a businessman who had once helped Amanda with her website. Soon, headlines began throwing out words like affair, secret romance, and betrayal. The stories exploded across various media platforms. Amanda didn't run from it, but she also didn't feed the fire. She calmly explained that she and Clive had already gone their separate ways before anything happened with Robert. Still, the damage was done. In the eyes of many, Amanda had broken something sacred. She was judged harshly by people who had never met her. Meanwhile, Clive remained quiet, only saying later that he had been aware of the situation, even if it hurt. Behind the scenes, the family was trying to adjust to a new way of living. Amanda stayed in a small home nearby. The children moved between houses as needed, sometimes sleeping at Raven's Seat, sometimes with Amanda. To the public, it looked like a sudden collapse, but to those close to the family, it was clear. This had been building for a long time. Amanda later admitted that going home began to feel like walking into a cold room. Even the small things, like asking a question about the sheep or chatting over breakfast, could spark a disagreement. Every word felt loaded. Clive's resentment had grown too strong, and Amanda's energy to smooth things over had run out. She also began realizing that what was missing wasn't just peace. It was friendship, connection, understanding. She didn't want to live with someone who only saw her as the problem. And Clive, wrapped up in his grief and anger, couldn't pretend to be okay with the way things were changing. He said himself in an interview, "I was awful to her." It wasn't easy for him to admit, but he knew he had played a part in the breakdown. Amanda was also honest. She said, "If we thought the world of each other, we wouldn't have separated." She wasn't blaming him. She was simply telling the truth. Sometimes love fades. Not because someone cheats or lies, but because people grow apart, and one day you realize you're no longer building the same life. The news finally became official in June 2022. Amanda and Clive released a joint statement saying they had made the difficult decision to separate. They didn't drag each other through the mud. There were no angry interviews or dramatic posts. Just a quiet, firm message. It was over. The internet lit up. Fans who had watched their show from the beginning were shocked. Some were heartbroken, others angry. Many blamed Amanda for chasing fame. A few blamed Clive for not supporting her rise. But most people simply didn't know what to think. How could a couple who seemed so solid for over 20 years fall apart just like that? In truth, the divorce didn't happen in a day. It happened slowly, over years of late-night arguments, long days apart, and the growing feeling that love had turned into duty. Amanda had tried to keep the peace. Clive had tried to hold on. But in the end, neither could stop the shift. Their children became the center of everything now. Amanda and Clive made it clear. No matter what had changed between them, they would always put their kids first. The children had already been living between two homes, and now that became the new normal. Clive stayed at Ravenseat. Amanda continued renting her cottage nearby. Life on the farm didn't stop just because their marriage had. But the show did. Our Yorkshire Farm, the program that had made them famous, quietly came to an end. Channel 5 never said the divorce was the reason, but the timing said enough. The family that had once been the heart of the show was now split in two, and pretending otherwise wasn't possible anymore. The public kept watching, though. Amanda went on to take new roles on different farming shows. She began traveling again, visiting other rural communities and sharing their stories. Clive and their son Reuben started their own spin-off, focusing on machinery, digging projects, and life as father and son. They no longer shared the same home, the same show, or the same future, but they did still share something important. 9 children and a history built through storms, snow, and seasons of hard work. The divorce was final, but the story wasn't over. Picking up the pieces and moving forward. After the public statement confirming the separation, Amanda and Clive's lives took new shapes. The world kept watching, but the story had shifted. No longer a portrait of a perfect couple running a country farm. This was now about 2 people trying to find peace after decades together. Amanda, often at the center of attention, faced waves of both support and judgment. Some fans praised her for staying strong and choosing what was best for her mental and emotional health. Others were harsh, accusing her of leaving Clive behind, of chasing attention, or of letting fame change her. Amanda didn't spend time answering every critic. She knew people had opinions, but she also knew what she'd lived through behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Clive took a different path. He wasn't as visible online or on television, but when he did speak, he surprised many. He admitted to his own mistakes. He said there were times he let anger win, times he turned cold when he should have listened, and times he made Amanda feel alone, even when they were in the same room. His honesty earned quiet respect. He didn't point fingers. He just accepted his part in what had gone wrong. The goal was no longer to keep the marriage going. It was to raise their kids with as much care, routine, and support as possible, even from separate homes. Soon, Channel 5 picked up Beyond the Yorkshire Farm. It was a father-son project, filled with the kind of practical hard work that came naturally to Clive. Amanda, on the other hand, leaned into her experience as a speaker and host. She started appearing on programs that explored farm life across the country. She visited different communities, spotlighted other shepherds, and brought attention to how varied rural life could be. Her role changed not just from farmer to presenter, but also from wife to independent woman. That change was not always easy, but it was something she stepped into bit by bit. She also kept writing. Her books didn't just focus on sheep or the land anymore. They reflected on motherhood, change, and what it meant to find your voice. Through her words, readers saw someone who had once felt stuck, but who chose to move instead of staying silent. The children, from oldest to youngest, adjusted in their ways. They helped with the chores, as always. They moved between Amanda's and Clive's homes without any issues. Amanda said in interviews that to them, this wasn't dramatic. It was just life. Animals still needed care. Homework still needs finishing. And the hills of Yorkshire still demanded early mornings and muddy boots. There was no big moment of reconciliation between Amanda and Clive. No televised reunion, no romantic comeback. But there was understanding. They kept things civil. They talked when needed. They showed up for the children. And in a world where many divorces end in bitterness, that was something rare. Their story became more than a television series. It also became a lesson in carrying on. Amanda and Clive didn't let the end of their marriage become the end of their lives. Of course, some fans still held out hope. Maybe one day, they'd be back under the same roof. But both Amanda and Clive made it clear. They were no longer a couple. What connected them now was not romance, but family. A big, busy family that still needed both of them. They didn't erase the past. They respected it. They remembered the years they spent working side by side. They appreciated the journey, even if it didn't end the way people hoped. And the farm? It kept going. The land didn't stop growing. The sheep didn't stop grazing. And while the story of Amanda and Clive as a couple had ended, the life they'd built still echoed through the hills they called home. Amanda's decision to finally divorce Clive wasn't driven by drama, but by years of quiet change, distance, and emotional wear. That one moment when public pressure, personal exhaustion, and painful honesty all came together was just the final push. It didn't happen out of nowhere. It happened because they had both reached their limit. And in the end, she chose peace over pretense, even if it meant walking away from everything she once called home. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.